once again, everybody. So great to be with you on the MarquetteHoops.com basketball show. For the Marquette historian, John Dodds, and our producer, Jason Ruck, I'm Tom Pippins. We are brought to you by Moonlight Graham, Modern Dental Benefits. Moonlight Graham, a proud sponsor and friend of the program. And boy, what a guest we have today. Tell us, you go back quite a way with Ben Steele.
Ben Steele, I've worked with the Journal, stringing for them at Packer games for many, many years, and I've known Ben probably for about 15 years.
Well, let's hear from Ben Steele now, the Marquette Hoops basketball beat writer for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. He is a good one, and he's talking about Shaka's team so far. We are always privileged when we have Ben Steele, the Marquette beat writer for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel on, not because he's so good, not only that, but he shoots that ball maybe like Ben Gold. Or like Ben Gold hopes he will shoot it someday. What do you think, Ben Steele?
Maybe, I may be 20 years past my prime, but I can probably still shoot it a little bit.
Plus, he's an even better version of Travis Diener, but that's another story. Great to have you with us. Hey, Ben, does this Marquette, as we record here, we're approaching the new year, Marquette 10 up and 4 down, 2-1 in the Big East. A little bit of a challenge out of the blocks. I know, John, you said you had your concerns, but what is your impression of this team? Have they exceeded expectations to this point in the admittedly long season, particularly with the Big East now underway?
I would say they've absolutely exceeded expectations. Coming into the season, I thought this team would rely on its defense so far to this early part of the season. But it's actually been the opposite. This team has been really good offensively. Last night, they moved into the top 10 in Ken Palm's efficiency rankings, which if you had told me that at the beginning of the season, I wouldn't have believed it because I thought there were so many questions about this team as far as who's going to score the ball. After Justin Lewis and Daryl Morcell left after last season, they carried such a big load on the offensive end last season. And, to the coach's credit, all summer long, I was asking, Shaka and all the other assistant coaches, like, what's going to happen with the offense? Who's going to score? That's the biggest question heading into the season. And all of them were like, it's going to be a group effort. It's going to be collective. Oso Igdar is going to score more. Tyler's going to score more. David Joplin's going to score more. Stevie Mitchell's going to score more. It's going to be a group effort. And, I thought at the time it was just like coach speak, that was just like just giving me a road answer of some kind, but it's proved to be the case. They've almost got 5 guys scoring in double figures, and it's a very well-balanced offense that's playing out every game.
Our producer, Jason Ruck, like yourself, around the team a whole bunch, as is John Dodds. Do you say that depth is a real key? We were talking about that before the show.
Absolutely, yeah. They play 9 guys, and the way that Shaka's teams like to play, up and down at a very fast pace, and the defensive intensity that they play with, and with the full court pressure and everything, you need a lot of depth. And you saw, when they played double overtime against Providence last week, how that fatigue can really affect the team after playing 50 minutes of that style of play. So that depth is definitely key this season.
I thought it was interesting what Greg McDermott said after when they played the head coach at Creighton. After Marquette beat Creighton before Christmas, he was saying when comparing this year's Marquette team with last year's Marquette team, without Morcell and without Justin Lewis, he thought that the ball rotated more on offense and they were more difficult to guard. And the opponents really don't know who's going to go off. There's like 3 or 4 different players who could go off for 20 or more. You just don't know who's going to do it.
Yeah, that's been the impressive thing about this season, the way that this team has shared the ball, and there's been a different scoring guy pretty much every game. I think the biggest stat for this Marquette team is that they're shooting over 60% on 2-pointers, which is like a top 10 mark in the country. They're just pretty average 3-point shooting team, but this team really has 5 guys, and they can spread you out. They attack the paint. They really score around the basket. So that's really how they've been effective this season.
It was interesting last night. We had a unique experience. You and I were the only 2 media people covering the game. I don't know if it was because it was the Badger Bowl game where the TV stations were all gone, or I know the kids are all home for Christmas, the students. So none of the student newspaper or radio covered. So we were the only ones. So they brought us down to the locker room and we talked to Sean Jones. Then we went into Shaka's office. And I thought that was unique. I've been doing this 44 years and I've never experienced that. So either, you know, if you hadn't been there, I would have felt like Jesse White, the Maytag repairman or something, the only one there. But
what I want to know is, did Dodds let you get a question or two in? You know, when he gets on a roll, look out.
Yeah. He starts comparing players and putting them in the blender. You got to watch out. It's dangerous.
So that was a unique situation last night. Just what were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it was cool. Like, I guess you get some benefits if you show up to every game. You know, every once in a while you get to those kind of unique experiences. Yeah, it was cool. It's kind of, sometimes press conferences can be a little awkward. I mean, it's just the format in and of itself is pretty awkward. You know, with somebody on stage and you're waiting for a microphone, and it's not a chance to converse like two normal people. But in that situation like we were in last night, when Shaka's like eating his post game dinner at his desk in his office in the locker room, I think it lends itself to more of a kind of a human interaction, which is beneficial to everybody, I think.
When you look at this year, I think the thing that just jumps out at you is Baylor. And anytime, I know Steve Homer True saw me a few days later and he said that he thought that Baylor performance was the best he had ever seen in his 30 years at Marquette. And they're down 7-2 at the first TV timeout. And after that, offensively and defensively, it was as good as it gets. Every player he put in played as well as they could. And when you start comparing games to the 2006 Steve Novak game against UConn or the 1994 win over Kentucky to get to the Sweet 16, or the D Wade one at Kentucky against Kentucky in 2003 up in Minneapolis, you know you're in great company. And that Baylor game, that Baylor game probably was the most beneficial non-conference game in terms of ratings and impact in the new Big East history, because that's going to be a big deal.
Yeah, that game is gold, man. You put that in the bank, and that just draws interest over the season because Baylor, they're going to be a top 15 team at the end of the season. They're one of the best coached teams in the country. That victory is just gonna age like gold, like I said, and just keeps drawing interest. And yeah, well, that Marquette team probably on that night probably could have beaten some, anybody in the country that night, just the way they were playing. That's a really good Baylor team with really good veteran guards, and they could barely get the ball over half court, just the way that Marquette's defense was playing. It was an eye-opening performance.
The coach of Baylor's in front of me, and they were shocked. They thought
they weren't ready for the blitz, right? They didn't come out of the box ready.
Yeah, that was really surprising, to them. But the only downside of that game, there's always a downside to your biggest moment. And the downside, I think, was that Greg Gard was able to show the Wisconsin Badgers the game tape of Baylor, and they probably thought they were playing the Lakers or something and they came out, and Wisconsin Chucky Hepburn, holy mackerel. But on a positive, they had to shoot lights out to beat them. Mm-hmm. It was that good of a game.
They came back and forced the overtime.
What was your take? Being a Badger grad, Wisconsin grad, you're probably more. I'd love to hear your insight on that. What did you think of that Badger Marquette game?
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely an outlier shooting performance by Chucky Hepburn, to say the least. And I think with this Marquette team, the next step is winning in those close games, like the Wisconsin game, like the Providence game last week, like the Purdue game earlier in the season. That's where you'll see the next growth. You see the progress starting, early in the season, third game of the season against Purdue. They really struggled down the stretch. They didn't know how to close out that one on the road. Gave up a 12-0 run against one of the best teams in the country when Marquette had them on the ropes. Then against that Wisconsin game, like we're talking about, Marquette fell behind 16 points early in the second half. Chucky Hepburn was out for a little while, but Marquette found a way to get back in the game, but they still couldn't close it out, even though they had chances at the end of regulation and in overtime. And the same thing happened last week against Providence. Marquette had that game pretty much in hand late in the second half. Offense went cold down the stretch. They got out of their rhythm, had a couple of untimely turnovers. And then it looked like they were down. They were going to lose in the first overtime. I had already started writing my game story like they were going to lose. Then Tyler Kolek scores 9 points in a minute and a half, and Marquette gets back in the game. So you're starting to see the progress a little bit. They just gotta get that closing blow or those closing couple baskets that they need to finish those games out. But you see the progress, and you started in that Wisconsin game.
Ben, credit the coaching, credit the young men, but it seems as if there has been a leap in the right direction in terms of improvement from last year. You look at guys such as Prosper and Iguodala. Would love to get your take on that. But how about Cam Jones? How high is the ceiling on this young man who seems to be able to get the ball off with that left hand in all kinds of angles and directions?
Yeah. Yeah, he's super fun to watch, right? He's so crafty around the basket, like you're talking about. He's not like he doesn't blow you away with his athleticism, so he's got to rely on spinning the ball off the glass and creating angles and his spin moves to create space. And we all know he's a phenomenal shooter from the outside. Yeah, he's just a really fun player, and you see his progress from this season. Early in the season, he was really relying on just shoot long jumpers. Shaka even called him out a few times in post game for settling for those 40-foot. I think Shaka called them moon shots that he was trying to limit, and then you see like the last month or so, like Cam's really been attacking the basket, and that's really unlocked his complete game. But yeah, he's one of the best offensive players in the Big East for sure. He's fun to watch.
Yeah, whenever I watch him play, I feel like I'm down at the pool hall and he's spinning things off the backboard. It's like he's using the bumpers. The only other Marquette player I would say that about was Sam Worthen. When Sam Worthen was here, he didn't have the athleticism to get off the ground, but he would stay on the ground and he would be so wily, and he'd do it with guile around the around the hoop. Cam Jones, last night, we're taping this the day after the Seton Hall game, and he hit a flip shot turning to his left off the right side, down, off the right side of the backboard and down, that people around the forum
like
were
the
just,
old Larry Bird, Michael Jordan commercials off the building, off the
it was kind of like that, but it was a flip. I mean, it's amazing what he can do. And it's almost like when you have a player like that, there's no such thing as a bad shot. You just don't want to just go out and use your instincts.
Yeah, that shot was probably the best version of a Cam Jones shot that you could get. I mean, I thought he was just kind of flinging the ball at the rim just at the end of the shot clock just to throw it somewhere near the basket, but it spun off like the top left-hand corner of the basket. It was phenomenal.
He's one of those players also that when he misses a shot, he goes back on defense, just kind of shaking his head. How did that happen? How did I miss that? He's got that type of confidence and expectation. Just a really unique player. And Shaka said before last season started that Cam Jones, he said, watch out, Marcus Howard and Jerome McNeil. There's another guy coming up the list. And he says if he stays here 4 years, which is a big if in the portal for any player, he said he'll be in the top five.
Mm-hmm. And Shaka encourages the green light, right? He loves it. Go ahead, shoot it, right?
Yeah, he definitely and Cam is not one to be shy about putting it up either. So he takes advantage of that green light.
We had a Providence podcast last week, and they said, what is kryptonite for Marquette? And I said, if you look at opponents, I would say Mississippi State. Mississippi State, kind of long, athletic, older veteran guys with depth. that would be like the kind of the tough matchup that you wouldn't want to see someone like that in the NCAA or in the Big East
Yeah.
as an opponent. But who would you like to see? And I said Notre Dame. Notre Dame would be ideal. If you could play Notre Dame another 15 times, you could probably win 13 of them or whatever, so or more. So what's your thought on that? Do you think Mississippi State is kind of like
Yeah.
the kryptonite?
Yeah, for sure. Any team with like a big banger down low who can gobble up offensive rebounds. So yeah, Mississippi State. But in the Big East, I think that team would be UConn, which is a top 5 team. They're good by any metric, but especially against this Marquette team when you got a 6'9", 300-pound, muscle-bound guy like Adama Sanogo. That guy's automatically going to give Marquette fits, and then you bring like a 7'2" Donovan Clingan off the bench like they have, and UConn also has like super athletic defensive guys like Andre Jackson and a bunch of super athletic wing guys. So UConn's going to be the next team looming down the road that I think is really going to give Marquette trouble.
In terms of indispensable players on the, we were talking over the last, say, 10 days or so, and you had mentioned that Marquette had 2 indispensable players in your opinion. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, you just look at last night's game, Oso Iguodala and Tyler Kolek. I mean, Tyler Kolek, one of the best passers in the Big East. We talked about how Marquette's one of the most efficient offenses in the nation. Well, that all starts with Tyler Kolek and the way he sets up the offense, the way that his passing is contagious, and the same thing with Oso Iguodala. Just the way from the center position, just the way he can hand out assists and do a lot of different things. He had 16 points and 10 rebounds last night, 4 assists, couple of steals, blocks. He just fills up the box score. Those 2 players that make everything go. And when you look at Oso Iguodala, and just there's not a lot of depth in the front court with this Marquette team. So when Oso Iguodala goes out of the game, it completely changes the way that Marquette plays, and they really need him. And you saw against Providence, like he was forced to play 45 minutes. I mean, he's carrying a really a heavy load for this Marquette team, but they need him to just because they don't have a lot of options in the front court behind him.
Ben, you talk about Tyler Kolek. He doesn't have the All-America talent, but man, he has moxie, doesn't? I know he can put it up. Was it 29 he got in the double overtime loss at Providence, right?
At home.
At home, yeah. And I love that, and that's got his leadership. I suspect will become even greater in terms of an important factor as the Big East continues to roll on into March and hopefully the big dance.
Yeah, he's the spark plug for this team emotionally. The way he shares the basketball. Yeah, you mentioned that Providence game. As the native Rhode Islander, he was pretty juiced up to play in that game, and you could tell like he was coming out aggressive, and that's what the coaches, the Marquette coaches, have really pushed Tyler to be aggressive on the offensive end and look for a shot. I mean, we all know that he's a tremendous passer, but if he continues to be more aggressive and finishing around the basket and shooting the open 3-pointers when he gets them, that's just going to open up even more passing lanes for Tyler because defenses are going to have to account for Tyler scoring. So that's why the coaches are kind of pushing him to be that version of Tyler Kolek that we saw against Providence last week.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Nobody,
capable.
Yeah, nobody works harder, according to the coaches, than Kolek. And his outside shot, he's shot 10,000 over the summer. It's still streaky, but where he's really improved is he's gotten a lot stronger, and he can take the ball to the lane with authority. And he's stronger than he was last year, and he must be working with Cam Jones because he's got some pretty good angles on the backboard too. Mm-hmm. And both of those guys being left-handed, just it's a little different defender. I talked to Tyler Kolek last June and during team camp, and I noticed that he was wearing number 11 this year. I think he was 22 last year. And I said, Tyler, no one has worn number 11 since 1969. And he says, is that so? And I said, yeah. Al McGuire retired number 11 in honor of Apollo 11 landing on the moon. And Al, working for Medalist Industries at the time, it didn't hurt at all. And I remember the story where Michael Collins, Edwin Aldrin, and Neil Armstrong were talking about all the gifts they received that whole year. They went all over the world touring 1969-70. They said the craziest gift that they got was from Marquette, when that coach from Marquette gave them the number 11 that they retired. And they said, but the best gift we received was that same coach gave us these medalist workout clothes, and they were the best things. We wore ours out after about 2 years. We wore them every day, and they're really comfortable. And so it was a classic Al McGuire. But wearing number 11, nobody's done that since the 60s. And just a really interesting player. I hear Seth Greenberg on ESPN talk about Tyler Kolek, saying that he's the one guy in America who's out not for himself on a court. He's out there trying to set everybody else up. So he said it's a unique guy, but he can score.
Yeah.
And he can get streaky. So
yeah, he's the glue, holds it together. How about some of these young kids? Ben, we had the privilege of speaking with you before the season, and you had some good comments. What do you think of the progress so far of the likes of Chase Ross and Sean Jones and the aforementioned Ben Gold?
Yeah, there's been ups and downs as to be expected with young players. I think Chase Ross has proven himself to be probably the most Big East ready of those three players, just with his physical frame, just being 6'4". And if you see him up close, Dodds has seen him up close. He's like super strong, really, really well put together for his age. So he's able to, and his game doesn't require him to have the ball a lot. So he's a guy, I think Shaka just calls him a good blend guy, just because he can go out there and play with anybody on the court, just because his skills lend himself to being a versatile defender, or being just attacking the basket on offense, being an athletic guy. So he's probably proven himself to be the most ready for the Big East season. Sean Jones has been a little up and down. You see him play 5 minutes against Providence, but then last night played over 20 minutes against Seton Hall and was really effective. Seemed to be more aggressive, looking for a shot. Hit a couple crazy 3-pointers. We talked. Me and Doss talked with him about his crazy 3-pointer at the end of the shot clock in the second half last night. But he was definitely more confident last night. There's going to be games with him just with his size. He's only 5'10", so he's still figuring out like how aggressive he can be going into the lane against the size of some Big East opponents. And Ben Gold is the same way, just coming. His playing time kind of fluctuates a little bit just because he's figuring out where he can be effective. His skills are a little different than Oso Iguodala's in that he's more of a spot up shooter. Doesn't really bang down low with the offensive rebounds, defensive rebounds. So I think both those guys you saw against Providence, they had a little the deer in the headlights look, playing on the road against like a rabid crowd, Big East opponent crowd with like 12,000 crazy Rhode Islanders screaming at them. So I think that was a little shock to the system, and they got to go through those learning experiences. So there's going to be even more ups and downs for those guys as the season continues in the Big East.
To get the blender out on the...
We can't go for a show without JD with a blender, a combination of whom and who.
Well, Chase Ross is a combination of a young Jimmy Butler and a young Jimmy Butler. I think he is really tough defensively. He reminds me of Jimmy Butler right when he came in from Texas via JUCO. Tougher than a $5 steak on defense. And I think he could really be a nice player. He's got a nice shot too. Another left-hander. We have a lot of, we lead the league in left-handers. Sean Jones reminds me of, Marquette fans will remember Mandy Johnson and Dominic James. Those are Mandy Johnson was from New Jersey and Dominic James was from Indiana. And he's got the athleticism. He's more athletic than Mandy was. And he's maybe a little bit tougher defender than Dominic, but Dominic was pretty darn good. So, and then finally with Ben Gold, I've called him Wally Hauser because I think he's the third Hauser brother. He's got the skill set, but it just hasn't come yet. But you can see, and I saw him at team camp in May, and he was fantastic. But looking back on it, he was probably fantastic because he was playing against players that were shorter and not as good as they were now. But that's the guy, Ben Gold. Shaka said that he has the best upside, highest ceiling of any of all the three freshmen. It's just, when is it going to hit? I hope it hits this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they could use it.
You
What's
guys
your
need to
take
get
that
Home
way, Ben?
Depot. You guys need to get Home Depot to sponsor the John Dodds blender section of the show.
That's a great idea. That's a capital idea.
Hey, Ben, as you look at this team, and again, early in the new year as we approach it, 10 up, 4 down again, and 2-1 in the Big East. Is this a team that, as it gets tougher down the stretch in those dog days of February and March, as you're well aware, that can be right there at the end, maybe not to win the Big East regular season crown, but to make some noise, to make a good run in the conference tourney, and then hopefully punch that ticket to the big dance and perhaps win a game or two? Is this team capable of that as you look into your crystal ball?
Absolutely. I think if you look at the resume so far, we talk about the Baylor win. That's going to help during the NCAA tournament seeding process, like at ages like gold, like we talked about. And I think, like I said before, I've been surprised at how good the offense has been, but I think the defense still has a couple levels to go. So I think as you see the progress on the defensive end, that's going to make this team just even more formidable. I think a top 3 finish in the Big East is not out of the question. Top 4 probably most likely, but that'll probably get you NCAA tournament invitation. Winning the Big East, that might be too much of a task for this team. Like I mentioned, like UConn, just the way UConn is built, it seems perfectly built to beat this Marquette team. I don't know if anyone in the Big East can hang with UConn this season, but yeah, top 3 team in the Big East. I don't think that's out of the question at all for this Marquette team.
Justin Lewis leaves, and he was such a very rugged and marvelous rebounder. Do you see any improvement in that area, which was admittedly less than par, below par last year, in part, I suppose, because of the size? Are you seeing them pointing in the right direction that way?
No, I think that's just going to be an issue all season, just with the lack of depth in the front court. Zach Reitzel's injury, I think he's going to have season-ending surgery. I think Marquette and the Shaka and the coaching staff were kind of banking on him helping out as far as hustle plays. That they were thinking he was the NAIA player at Loyola last season. And they thought like his hustle plays and his rebounding would translate to the Division I level. Just unfortunately, we're not going to be able to see if that is going to be the case. Just he had a troublesome left knee injury that's bothered him all season. As a hustle player, just limits his effectiveness, and he just never got to show what he could do at Marquette, which is unfortunate for him. Yeah, I think that just the rebounding is going to be an issue all season, and they're just going to have to find ways to counteract that. They're going to have to send 5 guys to the glass sometimes, have all the guards help out. It's just going to be a team-wide effort like the scoring's been. But it's college basketball. You can't sign a free agent off the street to help out with your weaknesses. You just got to find ways to work with the roster you have and find ways to counteract your weaknesses.
Yeah, it seems like the lack of depth is the Achilles heel, and the last few years of the Wojo era, and then last year, kind of the younger guys tend to fade toward the end of the year. The mentally and physically, the Big East is tough. They start to wear down, and not having Zach Reitzel is a big loss because you could have Buzz had his Trent Lockett and Wojo had his Caton Reinhardt, and those seniors really help. Those grad seniors can really help steady the ship when needed. So that really puts a lot of pressure on the freshmen. The freshmen really have to develop, or Kian Tijere might have to take a step. It might be needed in a game later in the year.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, that's a really tough position for Kian to be thrown in there. In the middle of Big East play. You would have liked to seen him get some more minutes in the non-conference, just to really Like everyone on the team says he's the best athlete on the roster. Just the way he can, if you watch him in the warm ups, like just watching him, just the way he can leap, with like a 40-inch vertical leap it's pretty phenomenal. He just hasn't had a lot of experience playing basketball, which is he you'd like to see him have a little more of that in the non-conference game before he gets thrown into the Big East against really rugged Big East foes. I think that might be a little too much for him to chew. But yeah, just the depth of, like we've talked about all show, like the depth in the front court is really going to be the challenge for this team.
I've got one more for you, and he is, of course, Ben Steele, the Marquette basketball beat writer for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. As JD says, a pro's pro and an even better person. We're always grateful for your time. I know that you're always enthusiastic, but I just sense in you that you're having fun covering this particular bunch coached by Shaka Smart and his staff.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as John can attest, the roster is just a bunch of really good players, really good dudes, really fun to talk to. Shaka's really interesting the way he thinks about the game, and he thinks about leadership, and he thinks about culture. He's really a thoughtful guy, and if you watch any of the press conferences, you can see that it comes through just the way he talks and his mind works. It's there's lots of good stories with this team, and I'm never going to be sorry for that. I'm always thankful for any good stories to cover.
You bet, and you share them beautifully, by the way.
And he's interesting in that I've never seen a coach or never been around a coach that seeks the input of the team. He tries to get them involved in voting for certain who's enthusiastic on the court. Just they give out little awards, and he seems to really care about and communicate with the guys on the bench. I've seen coaches that kind of take a player and leave them at the end of the bench, and they're gone forever, and then they're gone out the door. So I'm wondering in this portal era, if that's an interesting strategy where he can keep players here. Retention is something I think he cares about.
Yeah, that in the era of NIL money and immediate eligibility in the transfer portal, I think the relationships that the coaching staff has with the players, I mean, that's key for year over year retention. I'm sure along the way there's going to be a few transfers here and there. Just it's inevitable these days, but I think more often than not, I think Shaka's relationship with the players are going to carry through and keep rosters intact more so than any other teams in college basketball across the nation. Yeah, I mean that's the benefits of hiring a guy that's been a head coach for a long time. 13, 14 seasons. He's been through. He's thought about this stuff. He's developed his identity and the way he likes to do things, and he's figured things out from all those years. And he's definitely a really successful college. I mean, the results speak for himself. He's a good college basketball coach.
Want to get your quick take on the 2023 recruiting class. Trey Norman, Al Amadou, and Zaid Lowry.
Yeah, these are three typical Shaka Smart players. Really athletic, really multiple, kind of versatile, can guard multiple players on defense. Just going down the line, like Trey Norman's, I think, going to be the best of the bunch. I think that's pretty much a consensus by anyone who looks at this recruiting class. Coaches are super high on him. He's a super tough downhill guard, gets into the paint, finishes around the basket, really rugged defender, just your typical Shaka Smart guard, I guess you could say. I think this isn't just my opinion. This is what other people have told me, but I think he's really got a chance to be a professional NBA player eventually. The other guys, Zaid Lowry is kind of, you can compare him to Chase Ross a little bit. He's got that super athletic ability, can be really disruptive on the defensive end, get out in transition. Very, very, good athlete, run and jump type of guy. Al Amadou, probably more of a project. He's super skinny right now, so he's going to have to build some strength before he can be a really effective college basketball player. But you see the skills if you watch any of his games. he's really kind of a modern big man in that he can shoot 3-pointers, but he's still like an effective shot blocker around the basket, really long, really good athletic ability. If I can get out the John Dodds blender, kind of a mix of Kurt Queth and Oso Iguodaro, kind of the very multi-dimensional big guys that Shaka Smart likes to play with.
Ben, it is always a pleasure to have you on the show. We really appreciate your expertise, and very good to see you again. Wish you nothing but the very best. A happy and blessed new year to you and all your loved ones. We'll do it again, I hope.
Awesome, man. It's good to hang out with you guys virtually. The set looks nice. It's good to have you guys back in action.
Ben Steele, the Marquette beat writer for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. He's as good as it gets. That's the MarquetteHoops.com basketball show, everybody. Super to be with you once again. Of course, this show is brought to you by, and our guests are brought to you by, our proud sponsor, Moonlight Graham, the proud sponsor and featuring modern dental benefits. Moonlight Graham, a friend of this program. JD, talk about the website. It's a good one.
Sure, MarquetteHoops.com. All the TV shows will be archived at MarquetteHoops.com. Also, if you want to be kept abreast as to future guests on our show, just drop us an email in that widget on the right-hand side there. Just drop your email right in there and we'll keep you abreast on our free newsletter.
Well, as they say in the biz, that's a wrap. Go MU and God bless. Look forward to your company next time, everybody.